Hi, it's Kim. Today I have a process video showing you how to make this set of 4 6x6 collages using 49 Market Naturalist collection. These collages could be used as card fronts or could be framed as very cute little gifts which you could give as a set of 4 or individually. I have sped this process video up quite quick because it took me over 4 hours to make these collages plus drying time, and obviously I needed to get that down much shorter to give you a process video, but I think you'll see all of the steps that are involved. So the first step, I chose a neutral background paper, which I did move away from the Naturalist collection here, and I used the Golden Dream paper, the A side of that from the Vintage Artistry Everyday collection. But you could use a mixed media paper, a watercolour paper, or any other neutral paper from 49 Market. This paper's good because it has some sort of neutrally ledger print on it, as well as some outline florals, so it makes it quite a nice background for a collage. I have added a clear gesso to that and allowed it to dry, and once it was dry I've cut that 12 by 12 piece into 4 6x6 inches. And now I am taping those pieces down using painter's tape. You can also use artist tape or masking tape, and I have taped it down to a board which I use for this purpose. The board's about 13 inches square, and I've just used the tape to get a nice even border around each piece. So now you've seen me proceed. I have added journaling to the back of each of those cards, each of the collage pieces. You can put anything you want in this journaling because, as you can see, I then proceeded to rub parts of that journaling out, scribble all over it, and then add gesso randomly over that journaling. The point of this is that the journaling is a layer. You don't actually end up seeing much of it. You may see little bits of words peep out and little bits of the scribble lines peep out from behind pieces of the collage paper. So you should feel free to really write what you want and get your feelings down on paper. You know, I do tend to write about my feelings because I know that they will be covered up, and it really is a chance to vent. What I'm doing now is going through all the various elements from the Naturalist collection, and I'm creating piles of potential pieces that could be used in each collage. It doesn't mean that I'm going to use all of these pieces on each of these small collages. They are only quite small, but what it does is it gives me a potential pile of coordinating items, because what I'm doing is creating a coordinating set. I don't want them to be identical, but I want them to work together. So they need to have a consistent feel. So I am trying to get a mix of elements across the 4 piles. So each pile should have a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green, a little bit of red. And that means that when it comes to creating the collages, if I pick some elements from the pile, each collage should then coordinate with the other collages. I've then also used a piece of the Naturalist journal card paper, and I'm tearing that up, and it's a great paper because it has various journal cards printed onto it, so you can get different sorts of patterned paper by tearing it up, and you can add bits of pattern paper in different shapes. So it is important as you tear it up to tear it into different size pieces, and I am adding little bits of that paper to each of those piles. And so by the time I've torn that sheet of 12 by 12 up and I'd been through that pack of the ephemera pieces, so that was the Naturalist ephemera bits that I went through first to divide into the piles, I've ended up with this really nice collection of pieces to use in the collages. Now what I'm doing is I'm using some of the pattern paper, and I'm punching some little circles out of some of the pieces. I love circles, and so I like to use circle elements in my collages, and so I like to use the background paper that I've punched the circles out of, and then I also like to use the punched circles also on the collages. So On each of these collages, I'm also going to use a rub-on leaf element, so that will also tie each of the collages together. So you can see here on this first collage that I'm now working on, I first mapped out the basics of what the collage might look like. So I chose some elements that I liked, put them down on the page, worked out where there would be a space for the rub-on, put the rub-on down. So you can see that some little bits of that journaling and scribbled that I've gessoed over will show, little bits of it. And now I am starting to think about how those collage elements from that pile that I created will appear on this page. So I'm using a soft matte gel that I'm applying with a small silicone brush. So when I put the clear gesso on, I used a larger silicone brush to apply that. They're good because you can get quite a thin layer, or if you want to, you can apply a thicker layer of the glue or gesso as you're applying it. So I'm just using that to apply soft matte gel to both the background piece, the back of the collage piece that I'm sticking down, and then once I've stuck it down, the front of the collage piece to seal it, because I want to make sure that as I then go to add wet mixed media to this collage, which will be one of the future steps, that the paper can handle that wet mixed media. So by adding the soft matte gel as part of this process, I will be protecting the paper. So by doing it as part of the process as I go through, the paper will be protected. So I ensure that it is. I'm also using some of the everyday Vintage Artistry everyday washi tape, little bits of that in the collage as I go through. So now I'm looking at the second of the collages. So I'm just again moving some items around from that collage pile and looking at where I can fit the leaf rub-on, because as I mentioned, the leaf rub-on is a consistent element across all 4 collages. Now it is important to me that each of the collages looks different, so I don't want the collage elements, the paper elements, to be in the same layout. I obviously want to be using similar colours and similar items, but I don't want them the same, and I don't want them in the same positions on the collages. So I'm looking to make sure that they are mixed up from collage to collage. So in the first collage, the leaves were in the top right corner. In this collage, they're in the bottom. The leaves rub-on is in the bottom left corner. And then I am building a column of the papers up the right side, whereas in the previous collage they were up the left side, and then there was a piece going across the bottom of the collage. So as I said, it is important to make sure that you create a different layout of the collage elements from collage to collage. And you can see there that I am sticking down that punched out paper. So that's the sort of discard paper from what I punched the circles out of. And that is because those punched out circles create very interesting texture. And now I am sticking down the actual circle shapes as well. So the circles punched out of the background paper creates a very interesting texture, though. When you come to put the mixed media down in one of the future layers on these, those circles cut out of the background paper will capture that mixed media into those into that texture, and it creates pools. It creates texture where it captures more colour, so it adds a very interesting element to the collages. So by doing things like those punched out shapes, it's an important addition to the process, as well as the fact that I love circles. So if you have a particular shape that you love, whether it be stars or squares or something else other than circles, you can use those. So this one here, I am putting the leaves in the bottom right corner, and the piece of journal card paper has that butterfly and that word here on it, which I actually end up highlighting as part of the final collage. And I do want to keep that because I really liked it. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to cover it up in the collage process. So I'm sort of fiddling with that to make sure I retain that and sort of have it as the focal point, or can work it in as part of the focal point as I build up this collage. So I'm just fiddling with the various pieces, and then sticking down or rubbing on the rub-on leaf. As I said, so now we've got top right, bottom left, bottom right, and then using again the soft matte gel to stick down the collage elements. I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to tell you here at this stage other than, obviously you have complete discretion as to what elements you use to build your collages. I think it's a good idea to make sure that as you do build your collages that each element touches other elements in the collage. I think that it builds cohesion in your collage, though you can join them together by using paint or gesso, or rub-ons, for example. But I think it is a good idea to make sure that the various elements in the collage are touching each other, unless it's something like those circle punches where they're sort of intentionally floating out. But when it comes to the torn pieces of patterned papers and the ephemera bits, I think they should be all, well, my preference is, as I develop collages, that I like them to be touching each other. I think it is more cohesive in that collage process. But again, art is a very individual thing, and these essentially are not scrapbooking, they're more art. And I think that really they work super well framed up. These collages, I've given them as gifts and had them framed up, and they look amazing. And I will apologise just here, I didn't realise how dark it was getting. I worked on these collages over quite a considerable period of time, and I didn't realise that as I moved into the evening that the light had got so dim, but then I realised and I did turn on the light, so it did get a bit better. So again, I apologise for that. But so now I'm on to the last collage, and the leaf rub-ons are in the top right-hand corner here, and then there is a different layout for the collage, with the elements running vertically rather than horizontally on this collage pattern. So you can see there. And the previous one, the elements were also running vertically. In the other two collages, the elements were running horizontally. So that's another way that you can mix up how the elements in your collages differentiate from each other, is by altering them between a horizontal and a vertical alignment. So they are just about all stuck down now. A little bit of faffing to get things all stuck down. Now, it is important as you do each layer too to make sure that you dry between each layer, so feel free to use a heat gun, and I did use heat guns in this, though I did cut it out of the video so that you didn't have to watch me doing that. So I did heat gun before I started this next step, and this next step is using crayons. And so I am using a Neocolor 2 water oh wow, I'm really struggling with that, aren't I? They're water soluble finally got it out. Water-soluble crayons. So that's an ochre colour, and I've got a blue one as well. I'm putting that yellow ochre around the punched out circles, and then I am going to use quite a dark blue as well. I am using water on a paintbrush to dissolve that crayon because it is water soluble, so I'm adding the crayon directly to each of the collages, and then I am using water on the paintbrush, and then with the blue I'm putting the blue onto my mixed media mat for my glass mat, and then I am adding water to that, and then I am using the paintbrush to apply the blue crayon to each of the collages. You could use watercolour paint for this. You could use watercolour pencils. You could use any watercolour soluble medium to give you a soft watercolour type effect in the backgrounds of your collages. You could water down acrylic paint too if that's all that you've got. What you're trying to do is create a soft sort of, you don't want a solid colour because obviously that would cover up the collage work that you've done, and you don't want to do that. So you want something that's transparent, and most watercolours will do that. So you want transparent watercolours, anything that's water soluble. If you've only got acrylic paint, just make sure you water it down a lot so that it will be transparent, and then use that to tint your collage work. So that will give just some colour in different spots. Now what I'm doing is using a charcoal pencil. So if your crayon is, and that because you applied water to it, if it's wet, use a heat gun and dry that before you start this, because you're going to be rubbing this with your finger. So I use a charcoal pencil and I work my way around the edges of all the paper elements that you've stuck down, and then I use my finger to soften that charcoal line. And basically this will add definition to all of the elements that you have stuck down in the collage, so that you can more clearly see all of the different elements that have been used in the collage. So I just work my way around all of the different elements, adding a thin charcoal line, and then use my finger and lightly rub them, and it will just add texture and dimension and shadow to all of those different elements, just so that it's more noticeable. And what I'm doing now is I'm using more of the 49 and Market Naturalist rub-on transfers. There's a whole pile of splatters in that pack, and I'm using some of those splatters to add a variety of splatters over the background of the collages, and they're great. They look really awesome, and the rub-on transfers, 49 Market rub-on transfers, are amazing. They go on so beautifully and they work so well. So now what I'm using is the Vintage Artistry Dream stamp set. There's some really lovely word phrases in that stamp set, and I'm using it with a permanent black ink to stamp onto the collages. And the phrases are things like dream big, beautiful, oh happy day, and the last one is a phrase, and it says let your dreams be your wings. So they're really appropriate sayings for these types of collages. Plus I had decided that the focal points of these was going to be butterflies, so really appropriate for butterfly focal points. Okay, so yep, just using now a background stamp that is not a 49 Market, so you can use any background stamp that you've got. I'm just adding some dots and script just to soften the edges. The good thing about taping the edges when you add the mixed media, which we did with the crayon and the charcoal, and then you add this stamping, what happens when you pull the tape away is you'll end up with a beautiful crisp border around. So the stamping and the mixed media will only go obviously to the edge of the tape, and you will have this lovely crisp edge around your collages. Now what I'm doing will freak out a lot of people, but I am covering the whole lot with white gesso. It's not permanent, obviously. And then make sure you've got baby wipes close by and grab yourself a baby wipe and then just start wiping it away. And now what that does is just gives you a really soft finish to your collage. So it just softens the elements that you've previously added, including all of the paintwork that you did, so the crayon work and the charcoal. So you will get quite a bit of paint on your baby wipe, so you will need to change the baby wipes. Otherwise, you're just rubbing paint back onto the collage. You can rub away as much or as little of the gesso as you want. So if you want it more cloudy, you leave more gesso. If you want it more cloudy on the edges, leave more gesso on the edges. It's totally up to you. It's your collage. If you just watch that you don't let it dry for too long, it's good to let it dry just a fraction, because otherwise if you put it on, take it straight off, it obviously it's not going to be dry at all and it won't stay at all if you then rub it a lot. So you want it a fraction dry, but not too dry, because then it'll be too hard to get off. So you've sort of got to time it right depending on your weather and humidity and how quickly your gesso dries, etc. But yeah, don't let it dry too long, because otherwise you won't be able to get it off. So you can see there that it just adds just that little bit of a soft finish to it. Now, as I mentioned, I had decided that I was going to use butterflies as my focal point, and the rubons for 49er Market are just beautiful and they stand out really well. So I'm actually going to use the rubons as the focal points. And I decided that I wanted some text because I love text on these collages. And so I wanted some... I would often use book paper from old books, but 49er Market have these great book plates in the Naturalist range, so the Vintage Artistry Naturalist book plate. So I got one of those and cut it up. So I created a hollow circle to start with for this first collage, and I'm going to put a butterfly inside it. I tried sticking it down with just a glue stick, because I usually do use a glue stick, which would work fine for book paper, but the 49er Market papers are really heavy, such beautiful heavy quality paper, which is why I could actually make a collage on 49er Market paper, because they are so heavy, but that meant that glue stick wasn't going to cut it and it wasn't going to hold it down. So I did end up having to use a much stronger glue to hold that circle down. So I fiddled around with that a little bit. But I cut out another solid circle from the book plate, text paper, and I was going to stick it on that collage, but realised, well, that was just going to cover up that beautiful butterfly and word from the journal paper, and journal card paper, and I didn't want to do that. So I moved it to the collage at the top. But of course, it was a little bit new and bright. So I am going to get out some ink, yes, and gave it a really good inking. Then decided I'd probably inked it a little bit too much, but it's distressing, so perfect. I am now going to distress it significantly, lots and lots of water, and take off ink. So distress it. Nope, still not enough. So I'm just going to keep distressing and drying it and distressing it and drying it until it gets to the colour that I want. And I will also do something similar to the ring paper in the collage below. As I do that. And when that's dry, I'm also going to add some gold to this, because gold makes everything better. So you've learnt today that I love gold, I love circles, I really like butterflies, and I like text. So when I do collages, they often, in my art journaling and my mixed media work, those elements often turn up because I really like them. So a lot of my mixed media has gold and text in particular, and usually circles, and often butterflies. So there you go. So I've just added some inking to that hollow circle in the collage below, because I want it to obviously tie in. As I keep saying to you, it's really important that as this is a set, that there is consistency to them. My intention is that I really want to frame these up and have them somewhere in my home because I really love these. So I had a gold paint marker which I drew around that hollow circle, and I'm just rubbing that yellow butterfly in the middle of that circle, and I've peeled the top off that, just sticking that solid circle on in the collage above and drawing the gold around that, and then rubbing the orange butterfly in that one. And it looks great, stuck onto that book plate. It's perfect. And then I am going to add, I'm not going to use circles on the other ones. I've decided I am going to just use the butterflies directly on these two, because I contemplated about using circles but decided that was going to, as I said, cover up too much of that journal card paper, which I really liked. And there's actually a rub-on butterfly that's the same as the butterfly from that journal card paper, and so I used the same butterfly from the journal card from the rub-ons and put it over the top of it just so that it stood out more. And yeah, it worked out great. And then I decided to use another yellow butterfly, but a side-on one, from the rub-on pack for the top of the last collage. And so that butterfly is just perched on a leaf from the leaf rub-on. And to ensure that it has the gold on the circles, I added the gold to the little punched out circles. So it still has that circle and gold element tying the different collages together. Now I'm adding splatters of gold. I am using gold pigment powder that's suspended in a Arabic gum and water mix, but you could use any gold paint or ink. And then I think I changed my mind. I only did a few splatters, then decided I wanted to add some word strips. So I pulled some words out of the Vintage Artistry Naturalist ephemera bits, which had some great word choices in there. So I chose a selection from there. They had seek and find, adventure, more to discover, and stay curious. So they were great words. I got a little bit of gesso on a baby wipe and just rubbed a little bit over those words to soften them, because I wanted them to blend in with the background. I didn't want them to be too bright. So I'm just now sticking those down with wet glue, checking that they're straight. So I cannot get things straight most often. I'm not very good at getting things straight. So I like to make sure they're definitely straight. So using my T-square ruler there, and sticking those on. And once they're stuck on, I think I then go back to doing my splatters, which is the last bit to do. So I think I had done my gold splatters. I must have been very careful because I invariably end up putting my finger in splatters, and now I'm adding some white splatters. So for these white splatters, I am using the I think it's the Dina Wakley Media Gloss Spray, which is the gloss acrylic spray, but you can use diluted acrylic paint. You could use diluted gesso. Yeah, anything white that you've got that will give you some white splashes of paint to finish off your collages. And here are some close-up shots, and you can see the gold splatters and the texture that you can get from the stamps and the rubons and the gesso and all of the yummy layers. And look, don't miss out on these layers. They just give so much interest that when you look at these in person, you can see all of these layers under and over each other, and they are so interesting and detailed when you look at them close up. I just love looking at collages close up because they really just have so many interesting, so much interesting depth to them that you don't see when you look at a photo. You can see much more when you look at these close-up videos to what you see when you look at photos. They're just super interesting. And anyway, I thought you might be interested in seeing the great tape removal. My tip is when you are removing tapes that you will have a much less chance of tearing if you run your heat gun over the tape first. So that loosens your glue, the glue on the tape, and they will peel up much easier. I know, because I have torn finished projects because I was too impatient to pull out a heat gun. I can guarantee you I have never torn a project if I have used my heat gun over my tape. Thank you very much for joining me today. And these are the finished projects with the tape removed. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you give some collaging a go with 49er Market projects. I'm sure you'll be very satisfied with the result that you end up with, and you'll enjoy having some of your handmade artwork for your walls. Thank you and goodbye.